friends, and welcome to another cosplay making video. If I'm posting this, that means the cosplay came together in time for the event, and I'm excited to show you just exactly what I am a part of. So I was invited by a couple of friends to be a part of a 151 original Pokemon cosplay group. It is hosted by JessicaLunaCosplay, and originally I wasn't a part of the 151, but with a month out until the event, I realized that a few people had dropped out, and I had some friends that were already involved that told me that I should go for it. And so I checked to see what Pokemon were left, and Porygon is one of the Pokemon that were left at the time. So I took it upon myself to try and make a Porygon cosplay. Now, there isn't too many Porygon cosplays online to kind of go off or to kind of grab inspiration from, so a lot of this was looking at different cosplays from different people online, trying to gain inspiration from Porygon itself with all of its flat surfaces and things, and attempt to throw something together in the month leading up to the event. Now, it's been a week already. I have only done some planning, but I have not actually done any making. Today I am going to start on the helmet because I think for my Porygon cosplay I want a helmet, a breastplate, a skirt, and some like knee guards, shin guards kind of situation, and try and make some sort of cyber kind of armor. Now, this is the first time I'm making a full suit of armor out of foam, so I'm excited and scared at the same time, especially because I'll be going and participating in an event with so many other skilled cosplayers, so it's kind of daunting. Anyway, I hope this comes together. I hope you guys like it. And without further ado, I'll let you guys get to the cosplay.
The first thing that I wanted to tackle was the helmet because I felt like it was one of the main parts, yet something that I could probably easily throw together in a day. I found a free blueprint online for a dwarven helmet on the Punished Props Academy site. I'll link it in the description below in case you guys want to print it off and try and make it yourself. And once I had completely cut out the template, it was time to get my foam tiles. I buy the 4 packs from Bunnings, tape them down, and then cut them out. This was the first time that I was using foam for a whole armor build, so I was quite nervous. Even when I made the Midna helmet, I had a lot of help from Alk, since he's made foam armor before, and we actually just made our own template with some paper, rather than finding anything online. So every other foam project has just kind of been eyeballed until this point. Another useful tip, make sure the blade that you are using to cut out the foam is sharp. Best if you can swap the blade out for a new one. It's what I did with the Stanley knife. It just makes things a little bit more smoother and a little bit more easier to put together. Once I had cut out the initial pieces, this is only one side of course because we will need to flip the template later for the other side, it was time to attempt to stick it all together. I had actually bought some sealant from Bunnings years and years ago when I first started making foam projects, and I hadn't tried to use it until now, so this is me actually trying to use it. It definitely didn't go as planned, so I ended up substituting it for hot glue instead. The best way to do it here is hot glue on both sides of the foam that you're trying to stick together. Spread it out using either a paddle pop stick or the top of the hot glue gun. And then when it gets nice and tacky, press it and hold it together until it dries. This part can be quite tedious because it does take a while for the hot glue to dry, so I didn't want to show every part of it. It's literally me just gluing and holding foam together. Now that I had one side complete, it was time to flip the templates over and cut them out, though I skipped the cutting out part, and glue them together so we had another mirrored side. As you can see, I kind of take the template paper off each time I try to glue it together, and I do double check that I'm making sure I am gluing the correct sides together, also using the first half of the helmet as a reference for this side. Once that side is complete and I am happy with it, it was time to start trying to glue the two halves together. I just did it bit by bit, glue a little strip, hold it together, glue a little bit more, hold it together, glue a little bit more, hold it together, and keep going. The template that I used didn't have the visor top or the little diamond shapes on the outside. I just eyeballed those myself and put them together. It was now time to start working on other bits of the armor. This was a few days later. I had actually purchased some templates from KantoDownUnder's website. I ended up getting some round shoulder pads, which I made a little bit more square myself by sketching out some sharper edges. I got KantoDownUnder's Stormtrooper armor, specifically for the legs, and I also grabbed one of her corset breastplate templates. I did print this all at work, so I have no footage of me actually printing them. I did have to upsize a little bit though, so when I printed off certain templates like the breastplate and the leg armor, instead of the 100% normal size, I made it 106 just in case, because I know for sure that I am a little bit wider than KantoDownUnder. Once all the templates were completely cut out, it was time to take to the floor once again, use more of the foam tiles, tape down all the templates and cut them out. This part took forever because there was so many bits and pieces to cut out and put together, specifically for the Stormtrooper armor. I love how that turned out though, so I'm so happy I went with this pattern. It just was super tedious. I also wanted to add to the armor and make a more boxy kind of skirt, which I didn't record putting together, but I did eyeball that one. And to do that, I basically measured the circumference of my hip space while wearing the corset armor, and measured the full width of the foam tiles, did some math, and broke them up into 6 even trapezoid shapes to put together and make a skirt. I also wanted to make myself some wrist cuffs, which I just cut from the excess foam, glued together, and eyeballed the measurements for that one, using my own arms as references. This footage is just me gluing a bunch of things together, but I didn't record all of it because there was absolutely too much. Here's what the skirt looked like when it was in pieces, and the Stormtrooper leg armor once it was put together. I did want to try it on a few times just to make sure it was coming together. So this is what the skirt and breastplate looked like together once it was all glued, and I added Velcro to the back as well to help hold it in place. Once I had all the bits of armor completely put together, it was time to take them outside and seal them. I got advice from Alk to basically seal all the pieces with some PVA glue and water, kind of like paper mache. Thankfully, it was a nice couple of days to be able to do this. It had been storming the week prior, so I was worried that that was the weather going forward. Thankfully, the sun came out and I was able to get through most of the pieces quite quickly. Each piece took about 3 coats each because I wanted to make sure that I sealed any gaps that the foam may have had, as well as smooth down any rough edges. I did have to do this part in a few batches because I did all of the smaller bits of armor first to try and get them out of the way, making sure that they dried quickly in the sun and the wind, before doing the larger pieces after. I will note that I was rushing at this stage because I only had a couple weeks left until the event, so I was using a bigger brush to wipe the PVA solution onto the foam armor. However, if you do this, I would recommend you use a smaller brush and make sure the PVA is evenly spread because I had a lot of drippage and it just kind of left watermarks across some of the armor. I didn't mind too much because I knew with photos and things I would just fix it up in post. This is now me covering the bigger parts of the armor with the PVA solution. I have the bits of the corset in 2 pieces, the shoulder pads, and the skirt, which was the biggest and probably most annoying part to cover. I also threw a tail together in this time, using some leftover bits of foam and hoping that it stuck nicely to the skirt when I added the Velcro later after the painting, but it was a wait and see kind of situation. Speaking of which, once the foam was all dry, it was time to paint. I sanded one of the wrist cuffs down and did a test paint to make sure that I liked the coloring of it for Porygon, and then I settled in and started to sand down all of the rest of the pieces of armor. I was also using my little pot plants to make sure things didn't blow away because it did get quite windy during this stage, but as you can see, I'm just trying to sand off any rough edges and any drip marks that may have been left by the PVA solution. I did use 2 different grit of sandpaper, though I don't remember the exact sizes. One was coarse and one was more smooth, just to make sure that the foam would be nice and smooth for painting after. Once I was happy with the sanding, I grabbed my paint, which is actually a paint and primer in one. I do highly recommend this. It helps out a lot having the primer in the same can as the paint. And then it was time to spray everything. As you can see, I also used some old pasta sauce jars to hold some of the pieces so I could paint them evenly. I was also doing this on our outside table, so I did make sure that the whole thing was covered with garbage bags, stuck down by masking tape before I did any of the PVA solution or the painting, to make sure I didn't leave any paint residue on the table. Because the paint was quite good with the coverage, I probably did only about 2 coats of paint per piece. And then, of course, it was back to the sanding. Now you can probably tell by my outfits, but I did this over the span of a few days. I was also working from home during this time, so I had a couple of hours during the day just to kind of sit outside, use my lunch break, and make sure that I was able to get this cosplay done. Now that the smaller pieces were painted already, it was time to shake up some more paint and cover the bigger pieces. I also really love this shade of pink that I used for the helmet. It looked so cool when it finally went on. And of course, I just tried to make sure that it was completely covered, and also try my best to make sure that I didn't get any pink on the blue stuff or blue paint on the pink stuff. And this is what it all looked like when it was dry. Once I had all the completely painted dry stuff inside, I grabbed some black paint and I started to outline them all. I wanted to make the Porygon cosplay as 2D looking as possible. I know Porygon has some outlines themselves, so I wanted to kind of replicate that. I was also taking inspiration from the 2D cafes you may have seen. There's one in Japan and there's one actually in Sydney as well. And I liked the idea of having no shading but just the outline and the color. I did all of this with the smaller parts first, of course, and then in between went outside to spray paint the bigger parts. This is what it looked like with the first layer of outline. However, I felt like I wanted to make it thicker, which is what I did in that photo there. I also wanted to give the bigger pieces some outlines too, but I didn't think going over with marker or paint would be the way to go. So I grabbed some foam clay, rolled it into thin strips, and then attached it to the outside of the bigger pieces. I also used a credit card to just kind of shape it and make it more square, hoping that when it dried, it was a little bit more square, but it was still kind of bumpy when I was done with it. Now, as I was painting the bigger pieces, there were some pieces like the helmet or the top of the breastplate that had multiple colors on the one piece. I had to grab some masking tape and make sure I taped around the areas that I wanted to spray paint. In hindsight, this wasn't the best idea. I either should have let the paint dry a little bit more because it wasn't completely set, or used a different type of tape. But it's fine. This is in hindsight. Once I was happy with the taping, I then spray painted the colors that I wanted on these pieces, including the extra little pieces that are attached to the leg armor. Lastly, it was time to spray paint the skirt. And this is where I started to get a little bit worried because I didn't know if I would have enough paint, even though I bought 4 cans of blue. I half flattened it out on the table outside and I just completely covered it with a few coats of blue paint, coming out to check the drippage every now and again, as this is probably the flattest area or most surface area of the cosplay. I did want to make sure that it wasn't drippy. Once all those pieces were dry, it was time to use the black textures, black markers, black paint to add some outlines to the other pieces, completely cover the foam clay edges that I had done on the previous pieces, and add more foam clay to the bigger parts that I just spray painted. It was also at this point that I realized the Stormtrooper armor that I made for my thighs wouldn't necessarily be seen, so I decided to discard them at this point because the skirt was big enough to cover that area of the armor. Here's what all the pieces look like with the base paint and the foam clay edges. At this point, I was leaving them overnight to dry. I also kind of liked how the white looked on it. It reminded me of cake frosting, but I wanted to stick with the plan and cover it black. Also, I ordered this pink wig off Amazon, and that came in the meantime, as well as a pink bodysuit, which I threw on with some stockings and tried the pieces of armor on when they were all painted. This was literally the night before the event, and I was really happy with how it turned out. Whoop, jump scare. The next morning, the first thing that I wanted to do was put in my blue contacts. I also used this time to put on some eyelash extensions. I usually get them done professionally for events, but I bought these to try them out and use them instead. And then it was time to go to the event, so I hitched a ride with my friend Mads, and all my armor came too.
We're on set for a Pokemon photo shoot today. 151 original Pokemon. There are 151 cosplayers here, including me. So I'm gonna do some makeup and get going.
We rocked up about 2 hours early because they had the space booked for that time. Basically enough time for people to come early, get the props and the backdrop set up, and also get into the armor and stuff when needed. Also the night before, Alk was lovely enough to 3D print me a little sword, which we added a black outline to in the morning and brought with me to the event. I felt like it added a little extra to my outfit and it was really cute. I got quite a few compliments on that sword. I was a little bit awkward at this point putting on my makeup, but there was everyone else getting ready at the same time, and once I had the wig and cosplay on, it just boosted my confidence a lot. By the time I was ready, the rest of the Pokemon were also filtering into the area. As you can see in this video, there were so many cool ones, and not too long after, the photo shoots begun. Shout out to Mads for taking this video of me. They were lovely and stuck by me when I was overstimulated for most of the day.
You're killing it!
There was a set order to get your photos in. It started with evolution lines, then color groups, and then solo photos after. However, me and Mads, who was Mr. Mime, aren't a part of any evolution groups. So we did hang around and take some photos together and tried our best to keep cool and stay hydrated whenever we could. In between shoots, we also took a group photo. Hopefully you can see all 151 cosplays there. And unfortunately, I missed out on the blue group coloring photo, so I jumped in with the pink too. The whole event was also sponsored by Crust Pizza, so big thank you to Crust, especially Crust in Newtown and Dulwich Hill. They made sure we didn't go hungry on the day. I got photos with about 5 different photographers, but there were more throughout the event, and once it was time to eat, the whole armor had to come off, so I was done for the day. And that's it. That's how I made the Porygon cosplay for the KantoDownUnder photo shoot. A huge thank you for Jessica Luna for hosting the event and allowing me to join last minute. A huge thank you to the photographers who took pictures of me and made me look so cool. And a huge thank you to Mads as well for keeping me company throughout the day. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye bye!